the result is rejected and it has to be investigated, and we do not finalize it until there is congruence between what is captured by our staff and what is captured by the auditors themselves. Once the results have been audited by our independent auditors, it then becomes available in our system. All contesting political parties and independents have been issued a unique code to be able to access the results before they are even released to the public. The same access has been granted to media houses as well, who can access our system and view the results and monitor the capturing progress. So as indicated, we are sitting at 17% of results that have been audited. We also have voting stations that are still counting in the province, and we have a total of 98 of them, which makes up 2% of voting stations in the province. The stations where we are still counting are largely concentrated in eThekwini Metro, District 22, Umgungundlovu Municipality, as well as District 29, Ugu District. Those are carrying the highest numbers of the 2% of voting stations that are still counting in the province. But there are other smaller figures in other parts of the province, including Inkosi Langalibalele Municipality, Dandi, Newcastle, Manguzi, Big Five, Mtubatuba, KwaDukuza, Ndwedwe, Ixopo, and Kokstad. But those you will see one or twos in those. The bulk is still in the metro, where the metro alone accounts for 18 of the 98 voting stations that are still counting in the province. Yesterday, we experienced a late surge in numbers, particularly again in the metro. The mornings, the processes were flowing pretty reasonably, but after lunch, we had a sudden surge. And in some of our voting stations, our presiding officers were quite overwhelmed with the numbers that we saw coming in after lunch yesterday. We have indicated that we had a challenge with the voter management device that we use to automate processes at the voting stations. The idea is that it was going to make our processes much more efficient. But apparently there was an issue with the ICT's infrastructure that supports the functioning of the VMD. So as AM yesterday, we had already advised our presiding officers to put the VMD aside if this is the reason we are experiencing delays, and people should vote. We should administer a manual voting process. After that, we saw improvement, but because of the numbers, particularly in the voting centers and high population VTs, we saw a large number of queues, which was replicated in other different parts of the country in the voting stations that we categorize as voting centers. But as we had indicated, anyone who was in the queue by 9 p.m. yesterday had an opportunity to vote for as long as they were willing to remain in the queues and be processed in every voting station. It didn't matter how long the queue was. At 9, we put one member of the SAPS at the end of the queue, so there's no new people join the queues, and we process every voter that we had in our voting stations. Basically, that is the situation in the province. I know there have been reports of several incidents that took place. Some of them have been brought to our attention, and some had not. We regress that there were a few shouldn't have happened, but did happen. I know in Umlalazi municipality in Ashowe, an IEC official was assaulted by the voter in one of the voting stations, annoyed by the fact that his name was not on the voter's roll. In Caterich, we had a voter that was allegedly assaulted by a member of the SAPS after an altercation between the voter, the presiding officer, and the member of the police. We regrettably inform you of 2 lives that we have become aware of that were lost yesterday in our province. One of them is a voter that fell off a bakkie that was transporting people to voting station and was run over by the bakkie. We also have a stabbing incident in Bulwa, in Herikwala districts, where an altercation happened outside of the voting station, which resulted in the stabbing and somebody losing a life. These are very unfortunate incidents that we wouldn't want to see happening around elections. The Bulwa incident had nothing to do with the elections, but unfortunately it happened too close to the perimeter of the voting station. Lastly, we want to thank the voters in KwaZulu-Natal for braving everything that was going on yesterday and staying in those lines. At 11:30, there were still people in the queues that were being processed in venues like the City Hall and other high population VDs in the townships. And we appreciate how people appreciate our democracy and will brave anything to be able to exercise their vote. The final announcement is that from where we are now, political parties and candidates have got until 9 p.m. tomorrow to lodge Section 55 objections. These are the objections that could have material impacts on the results that we would have issued, because we are processing results as we go. And parties now and independents are aware that this is the window now where they could lodge any objections if they believe there is something that happened that could have a material impact on the results. They can lodge those objections up until 9 p.m. tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, PO. We are going to take questions, and if you could use that mic stand for our questions, that mic stand at the back. We're ready to take questions. Clive, use that mic. And anyone following can follow behind Clive.
Thanks, Taban, for the opportunity. My name is Clive Ndo. I'm from the Witness newspaper. I have two questions. The first one is around the issue of people, because of the length of time they spent in queues, ended up giving up and going back home without voting. Can maybe the IEC give us an idea of how significant the number was in terms of those kind of things? And also, there were a number of people who were saying that because of the technical glitches in the IEC systems, their names were not reflected, on the system. So I just want to check whether the objections which political parties will be lodging, whether that can be regarded as a legitimate objection to say so many party members did not vote and therefore the results are compromised. Thanks.
Thank you.
It's Dennis Dalbort from Netwerk 24. I visited the Durban City Hall yesterday, and one of the IEC officials informed me that various voters voted at that station without the necessary Article 24A registration form. Now, that is an illegal thing to do. I just want to know how the IEC will handle that situation, and is there a possibility that that whole voting station should redo their votes? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Fanele Mhlongo from SABC News. I would like to check from Mama Singa. We've been told that there is an IEC official that has been arrested in Plessesley in a voting station in Maritzburg. So we would like to check why was that official arrested.
Thank you. Looks like there are no other questions, PO.
Trust Fanele to remind me of things I didn't want to talk about. You are absolutely correct. I will start with your issue in Places Lane, Pietermaritzburg. It is correct. There is an IEC official that was arrested. What had happened is that later on in the day, the official, he was an area manager of the Electoral Commission. Area managers are an integral part of our distribution value chain. They are the link between our storage sites and the voting stations. So the area manager had left, wanted to top up one of the items that we use at voting station. And when he went to the storage facility to pick up what needed to be topped up, he realized that they had left one box at the voting station in the morning during the dispatch, and decided to take that box and take it back to the voting station. When he got back to the voting station, he was then accosted by members of political parties who wanted to know, what is this box that you are sneaking into the voting station in the middle of voting? And they then called the SAPS, and we checked and we established that it was the sealed box of additional ballots that had not been distributed. But because the SAPS was advised that all ballot papers had been issued in the morning, even though they were sealed and unused, they wanted him to go and answer for that at the police station, and the box was confiscated by the SAPS as well as part of the evidence, because they wanted to investigate what was going on. We have been consulted, the matter is under investigation, but we have shared our version of what happened with the SAPS in Tesisle. The Durban City Hall, the Section 24A, there is no form that needed to be filled at the voting station. The Section 24A provision is a provision that enables a person who may not have registered at the City Hall, probably registered in Pietermaritzburg and found themselves in the City Hall in Durban or close to town and chose to go to the City Hall, which is what always happens. And they needed to pre-notify us before the 17th of May that they intend voting outside of their voting districts. Once they are pre-approved by the commission, they are then put on the supplementary list of people because they wouldn't ordinarily be on the voters' roll of the City Hall. So in terms of what happens when they arrive at the voting station, they don't have to fill the form. They are already pre-approved. If the VMD is working the way it's supposed to function, on the VMD itself, we have a voters' roll, and then we've got a list of all the pre-approved Section 24A cases. If we scan your ID in a working VMD, we get a message that confirms that the person is already pre-approved for Section 24A provision. In cases where the VMD didn't work as planned, we had a hard copy of all approved Section 24A cases, as well as a hard copy of the voters' roll in every voting station. So with or without the VMD, the process wasn't supposed to stall in voting stations, because the primary tool to verify a voter at a voting station is the hard copy of the voters' roll. And in terms of the verification of people that are Section 24A cases, is the list of pre-approved Section 24A cases. So that's the process, the process that was supposed to unfold. At this stage, we do not have information that this process was not followed, but everything that is brought to our attention, either through political parties or anyone who would have observed any anomaly at the voting station, can bring that information to us and it can be investigated. But all our staff understood that you have an electronic version of the voters' roll, as well as the list of pre-approved Section 24A cases, as well as hard copies of both those documents at the voting station for use. If there's someone who made an allegation that people who were not qualifying for Section 24A cases were administered through this provision at the City Hall, we'll be happy to investigate that and ascertain what would have happened. In terms of people who may have arrived at our voting stations and were turned back, because their names did not appear on the voters' roll. It depends which version of the voters' roll we're talking about. If it's the electronic voters' roll on the VMD, our staff understand that the primary tool to verify voters at the voters' roll is the hard copy, at the voting station is the hard copy voters' roll. So if your name was not on the hard copy voters' roll, unfortunately, we couldn't assist you at a voting station level. If people were turned away, voting in South Africa, other than the days we administer special votes, is 1 day. There is no plan to have another voting day to accommodate any other eventualities that may have happened at the voting station. If there is an objection to us, that there is a mechanism within the commission to deal with objections, and they will be dealt with within that framework which exists for managing objections. But anyone who was in the queue and waited for too long and ended up deciding to go home, unfortunately, there is no provision in the country to set up another day to attend to people who may have given up on election day. So that's the framework as it currently stands.